Is Don.
Don Alcoholic, and thank you. I literally have found myself crying over there. I was nervous about this, but I walk in and I look around, I know so many people here. Not just acquainted, like friends. And I've got 9 months of sobriety, and I've been around these rooms for 35 years. And if you ask, I don't know why, but if you were to ask me why, I've never had this before. This connection, being part of this program. So thank you for bringing me into your lives. And so welcome the newcomers. I'm glad you're here. Try to jump all the way in. It took me a long time to do that. Thank you, Ron, for asking me to do the 10-minute pitch. You've been a friend, and you've just been a real example to me, your sobriety. And I grew up here. I grew up on Pacific Avenue. I'm a local kid. Started playing baseball over on that field right across the parking lot. And when I was 11 years old, my parents got divorced, and my dad got sober. So he was in the program. And that was about the time I had my first experience with alcohol. I had a garage party, probably not too far from here, drinking beer, getting that first feeling of relief, and just my life changed. And then I drank way too much, passed out, did really stupid things, and eventually got an interesting nickname, which I'm not going to disclose. And that was my drinking pattern until I got sober in 1991. I was 26 years old. I went into the back room in the Ilano Club. My parents are in there. My dad was sober. He married a woman named Paula. They were like pillars in the back room. You probably remember them, Wayno. And they were of service. They were well loved. And I walked in, and everybody was very happy to see little Donnie walk into the, because they'd heard about my antics, but they'd also seen how much I'd hurt my parents. My parents had to talk about, worrying about losing their son, because this thing kills people. And so, anyways, after that, I went to San Diego, got married, got a job, was sober, and had a couple kids. And it was great, all the blessings of sobriety. And then in 2010, after 19 years of not drinking, I got I got a thought that maybe it was just the cocaine that was the problem. I loved cocaine also. It brought me into the rooms earlier, made my fourth step a little more interesting, or just gross. So I told myself, when I go out and drink, if it doesn't go right, if it goes bad, I'll run back to the program. And so it went bad. It never occurred to me that I couldn't get back. It didn't even cross my mind. I loved the program. It took me 10 years to get back. Multiple rehabs, detoxes, lost jobs. My kids were teenagers. And, just the whole time, story of my sobriety, because a lot of people love me, close family. I tortured them, taking away their peace of mind. I was dying out there. Had a heart attack. And so that in 2020, I was, I should have been dead, and I came back home here. I came back here because my parents were getting old and they needed me, and my family begged me to get back. And so I came back. And I got sober, and things got good again. And I was able to take care of my parents through many hospital visits. I was service to the family and really led the effort to take care of them. And they passed away. My stepmom had 51 years sobriety, and my dad had 48 years sobriety, and I was able to make amends. I was clean with them. Then my dad passed in April of 2024. 2 months later, I picked up again. And I don't know why. I'm an alcoholic. Okay. Thank you. So that led ultimately to the worst spiritual and emotional crash I've ever had in December 3rd of 2024. And there were consequences. The whole time I was drinking, I was lying to the people around me, lying to the people closest to me about my drinking, because that's what I do when I'm drinking, even kind of when I'm not drinking. I can be a liar, cheat, and thief, And so there were consequences to my drinking, painful consequences. And I, had the guilt about drinking after my parents died. I had to tell my kids again. And I broke a relationship that I was in. And and sometimes, those consequences, sometimes I don't like consequences. And I try to charm my way out of them. I try to shimmy my way out of them. And sometimes I'm successful, but you can't always do that. And I wasn't able to do it with all of them. And so sometimes it's permanent, sometimes it's broke. And at that point, you just have to accept. And you stand up and you take responsibility, which I'm really bad at. I'll talk about that in a sec. And try to move on with integrity that I didn't have leading up to that. So I went through the steps with my sponsor, Richard, here. He was my sponsor before, but I never talked to him. I decided that I've got to change. I've got to change. And so he took me through the steps. He knew I'd been through the steps before, and so we mixed it up a little bit, but a couple things that I recall, concentrated on powerlessness, just the utter powerlessness of my life, of, not just alcohol, but everything. And we had a book to supplement it. It's called Powerlessness and the 12 Steps. It was great. And when you're just not in acceptance of what is, I end up in some sort of delusion, of what it should be, what I want it to be, and it's just insane, and I can't live in that place. And we worked on 6 and 7, and the concentration on that I never had in previous step work, and it was hard to look at some things, that pride and how pervasive it is, and things like, like I said, I'm a grown-up. I'm almost 60 years old, and I realize I don't like to take responsibility for my actions. I don't like to be accountable to things. I've got this defiant child in me. I need to grow up. It was so hard to look at that. Like, I could tell you the grossest thing in the world on my 4-step, but to look at that was hard. And so I had to look at that. And, the image management, the Don Rowe press release that this is how I want you to see me. It was killing me, absolutely killing me. So I had to throw that away, but I can't do it on my own. I can't get rid of this stuff. God has to get rid of it for me. So I have a deal there, and I pray that 7-step prayer. I have a prayer and meditation routine every day. I do that, and I beg him, that self-centeredness, selfishness, the character defects. And over time, it's getting better. I don't think I'm the same man I was a year ago, but I'll leave that to other people that have been watching me. But something's changed. Something's changed. And I have done amends. I actually consulted and worked and practiced with my sponsor before going out and doing my 9th step. I suggest that, because I've done 9 steps in the past that didn't go well. And, with my family, my friends, my mom and sister here down in a lot of my record was in San Diego. My daughter, my ex-wife, my best friend down there that I hadn't talked to in years because of my drinking. And, I talk to my son what it's like now. I go to tons of meetings. I'm involved in this program. I am working with others. My son calls me all the time. My son lives in Albania, and he's always FaceTiming me. I go down to San Diego every few weeks to see my buddy Ben and surf and see my daughter, and I'll go out to dinner with my daughter, my ex-wife, and her husband. Her husband had to peel me off the couch a couple times and drag me to rehab. So it's like, welcome to the family. This is my ex-husband. Wonderful man. And all of this is such a blessing. My life today, after all of that, it's just incredible. It is just incredible. And it is God doing for me what I could not do for myself, because I could not do this. And so I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for the program, those steps, and I'm grateful for all of you here. So thank you very much.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now our main speaker will share his or her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join us in welcoming Ron from...
Hi, my name's Ron. I'm an alcoholic. Very honored to be here. I want to thank Dawn for sharing 10 minutes that was awesome. It was like inspiring to me. And it's good to be here. I've been sober, a long time by the grace of God. I got sober in 1988 on Christmas Eve. Well, Christmas Eve was the last day that I drank and used. And this meeting was actually a big part of my early sobriety. I used to come in here 30 years ago. I don't remember if I've spoken here before, though, so that's kind of cool. Was anybody else here when I came in? I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. But, with the attention spans we all have now, including my own, if you're new, or even if you've been here a while, the spoiler alert is that there's an experience to be had here in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book. There's 12 steps, and there's people around here that have gone through the big book as it's outlined and done what it says to do, and they've had a spiritual experience. And it's really important to find somebody who's had that experience and ask them to take you through that. I had a really powerful experience with that. And that's really, if you take one thing away from what I'm here for tonight, that's the thing to take away, for sure. So, a little nervous. So, when I was a kid, I was nervous a lot, actually. I was an anxious kid. I wouldn't have described myself that way. I just thought everybody was kind of freaked out by this life thing. Definitely relate to the feeling of being here and not having the owner's manual kind of feeling. I felt like everybody kind of had it dialed, and I was looking around a lot and trying to be like I thought everybody else. The classic line about judging your insides by other people's outsides. That was me to a T as a kid. I had a very tumultuous upbringing. My dad was a practicing alcoholic. My mom was an untreated Al-Anon. My oldest brother was a raging, drug-addicted hippie, the most awesome guy I ever knew in my life, for sure. I looked up to him. Very rebellious towards my parents, and then I had another brother that had special needs, was autistic, and the family life was just crazy. And so from an early age, I felt it was hard to manage my own feelings. I felt out of sorts a lot, and And I didn't know why. And like when my dad was sober, he was the greatest guy on the planet. And when he wasn't sober, he was an angry, abusive person, you know. And so that screwed with my psyche a lot as a kid, looking back, you know, at it. And he also was he was a Major League Baseball player. He played for 11 years in the major leagues, which I thought was really amazing, and looked up to him a lot for that. And so did a lot of other people. And he would, you know, one time he like did a floater up onto the center divider in his Chevy Malibu, and was lodged up there drunk. And the cops not only helped get the car off the center divider, they got him home safe, you know. That's because he was this guy that pitched for the Dodgers, you know. And that was kind of like the way things went back in those days. And so when I was a kid, and he also was a periodic alcoholic. He had periods of time where he would go months without drinking, and it was like it built up this like hope, you know. And I would get very hopeful that, and he would tell me that he could turn it on and off whenever he wanted to, you know. And he believed that, and I believed that, you know. And then he would turn up drunk at the worst time, you know. And so so I had a really low opinion of alcohol as a kid. I thought that I saw nothing good about it, you know. It just, my parents would fight, my dad would be drunk, and, you know, I'd be out in front of my house shooting basketball, you know, at the hoop, and like if he pulled in and had been drinking, he'd have this deportment that was evil, you know, and I knew we were in for it for the night. Or he'd get out of the car and he'd have that kind look on his face, and I'd be like, oh my God, you know, it's like, tonight's going to be okay, you know. And that's kind of the way I grew up. So, and I had the good fortune of doing pretty well in school, having friends, and I was a good athlete, and I was a good baseball player, and I got a tremendous amount of self-worth out of that, a lot of attention from my dad because of that. And so I was kind of like the golden child in this family that had a drug-addicted, crazy older brother, middle brother with autism, and then I was like the savior, you know, and put a lot of pressure on myself, and felt a lot of pressure about that persona, you know. And underneath it all, I just felt completely unworthy. And it was crazy. And the reason why I bring all that up is alcoholism is based in these three things, right? And the main thing is this spirituality, this restless, irritable, discontent feeling that we have. And it's coupled with this mental obsession to pick up. And the bummer is we also have this physical allergy that once we start, we can't stop. And that's a big loop, right? And so, you know, the first time I took sips of beers here and there, and then when I was about 15, but I had a lot of fear about alcohol and drugs, you know, because I just saw what it did to my family. But when I was about 15, we all decided that we were going to do this thing, you know, and we got into my friend Darren's station wagon. For those of you that are younger, a station wagon is it's this really long car, and it had usually had some faux wood paneling on the outside. They usually got 6 or 7 miles to the gallon, and it was absolutely the greatest car to be a teenager and put like 10 people in it and go do crazy shit, you know. And we this one night, so I grew up in Long Beach, Lakewood area, and there was this liquor store called Southwood Liquor, and it became known that they would sell booze to anybody that could kind of see over the counter. And we sent Darren in. He was this big Irish Catholic guy. You know, he looked like he was maybe 19 or something. I mean, we were all, 15, 16 years old. We all put in our orders for what to drink. And I ordered a six-pack of Miller beer because I heard it was the champagne of beers, and set it right on the label. And you know, other guys and gals got like Boone's Farm. There was some Boone's Farm there, but I just remember, I'll never forget him walking out of the liquor store, and they put everything in this big box, and there was bottles sticking out and cans, and it was just like, this is going to happen, you know. And I drank, and then we went to there's another thing for you young people. There used to be this thing called the drive-in movie theater, and there was these that was a strange phenomenon. It took up about a square mile of real estate, and you'd pull in, and there'd be a speaker that weighed about 10 pounds. You put it on your window, and you could barely hear it. And then they'd start the movie before it got dark. So the first half hour of the movie, you couldn't even see what was going on the screen. But what a great place to go and drink, you know. Oh, my God. And so anyway, I remember I got about 4 of these Miller beers down. And I stood up to walk around, and I had a spiritual experience. It was like everything, you know, I had red hair as a kid. At that time, I was small. I was nervous a lot, and these 4 Miller beers just transformed the way I felt walking around on the planet. You know, it was like, oh my God. And I totally understood in an instant why my dad was doing this all the time. I understood why my brother was changing his consciousness all the time, you know, because to feel this way is so much better than the way I feel all the time. And it was so like instantaneous, so trustable. It was wonderful, you know. And I instantly knew, I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be the focus of my life, is feeling this way as often as possible, you know. And I've talked to a lot of non-alcoholics, and they don't have that experience, you know. Those of us that are, you know, in this room, or, you know, I would think many of us in this room, we just have a different relationship to alcohol. And I know after that night, my life was transformed. And I have to say that I don't think it was a bad thing in a way. I mean, sometimes alcoholics will share that, you know, alcohol was medicine for me, you know, and I think that if I wouldn't have had that, I don't know how much longer I would have been able to stay on the planet and be able to be here. You know, it was just so, such a gift, you know. And so that's what high school became, you know. I was an athlete. I played baseball at a, you know, pretty high level, and I had a lot of interest from colleges for my baseball playing. I was a left-handed pitcher, and so my big thing became being at the right party, you know, drinking as much as possible, and playing baseball. And that was like where I got my joy, or my, you know, sense of worth on the planet. And yeah, so started drinking. It was a lot of fun at first. Immediately when I drank, I definitely, once I started, I couldn't control how much I couldn't control it once it was in my system. And it led to all the problems that we always talk about. You know, I crashed cars, said things to people that I didn't want to say, lost relationships, and the whole time kind of hiding it from my parents. And one of the things that happened in my junior year of high school when all that was going on is my oldest brother, overdosed on heroin and died. When he was 26, I was 16. And that, too, was a huge turning point, because it was the first time that, like, I don't know, how to put it, it's like life, like, encroached into my little, like, plan for the way things were supposed to go, and just hit me with this thing that seemed completely insurmountable, you know. He was an absolute hero to me, and you know, it was like being told that, it just, you know, it destroyed me. You know, it destroyed all of us. And also, we were so ill-equipped as a family to deal with it, you know, and like, there was this huge pressure to like just get back on track and kind of avoid dealing with it. There was never any like, we should go to therapy, we should talk about it. It just wasn't like that, And so one time I saw my dad break down and cry, and it was terrible. awful thing. And anyway, but this is the thing I've learned about, and having a relationship with a power greater than myself is like, I truly know now, and I'll get to this a little bit later, everything happens for a reason, and like God, there's no mistakes in what and how things happen. And in a strange way, that situation, it had a lot to do with me getting sober, because when my brother passed away, I had a tremendous amount of shame and guilt about my own drinking and using. And in the 80s, there was a lot of this white Peruvian marching powder. It was around a lot. And I really liked the smell of it. And I was a pig with alcohol, but I was a real pig with Coke, man. It was like, I just could not. And so I had this like juxtaposition of, I was an athlete and I was trying to go somewhere with my baseball career. And at the same time, I was running around with these crazy people going to Hollywood, going to punk shows, snorting a tremendous amount of Coke, and living that lifestyle. And it was incredibly hard and hiding it from my parents. And so I had a bunch of fear and guilt and shame that I was going to drop dead just like my brother did and put my parents through what they went through with my oldest brother, And so I'm kind of going fast through this drunk log part because I want to talk about recovery, but it all came down to a place where I was kind of faced with a situation, and people in Alcoholics Anonymous talk about a moment of clarity. And I had this situation happen. Like I said, I got sober for Christmas, and I was on a run, and it was Christmas Eve, and I came to, and I was at this dealer's house in Belmont Shore, and I had to be at my parents' house for Christmas Eve dinner back in Lakewood, and so I had to go, and I was living right down the street here. I was living in Manhattan Beach, and I had to somehow get back to Manhattan Beach, get cleaned up, get back to my parents' house, and so I drove away from this dealer's house, and I was about to get on the freeway, and I watched my car make a U-turn and started heading back to the dealer. And I had this moment of clarity where it was like, because I was going back to get more blow, And it was the rudest place I've ever been in my life. It was just the most it was incomprehensible demoralization, I mean, hundreds of times I'd try to stop, but that time I just felt so, I felt childish. I don't know how to explain it. I felt so immature, so lame, so can't take care of oneself feeling, I guess is the way to say it. And I went back and I got some more drugs, and I did that, and I got on the freeway to drive back here, and I had this my first kind of thing where I consulted with God, and I started saying, I was bawling my eyes out. It was raining. I was driving, being up for 2 days, drinking and doing drugs. Not a vision for you on any level. And I consulted with a power greater than myself, which becomes a way of life in this thing. But at that time, I wouldn't have said that's what I was doing, but that's what I did. And I said that God, please help me, and I'll do anything to not feel this way ever again. And what came back to me was telling yourself now when you feel this bad, don't wait till you feel better, And so I went back here. I was living in El Porto, and I got into my apartment. My friends were there, and they were dressed nice for Christmas Eve. And I walked in, and they're like, "Oh my God, what'd you do to yourself?" And I said, "I'm calling my parents. I'm gonna get clean and sober." And they're like, "No, don't do that," And I'm like, and I just knew it. I just knew, it was like, intuitively I knew that this was the jig was up, And so I called my parents, and, I talked to my mom. She was in Al-Anon at the time, which was a real godsend for me. And she said, just come home, And so I came home, and we had this talk, and my dad, basically said, well, I'm not dealing with, I'm not going through this again. You went through this with your brother, so if you're not sober, I can't help you. And my mom said, go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was funny because I was under the impression that you had to go to treatment. You had to go to like a 30. Like I told my mom, I'm like, okay, I got to pack for 30 days. Am I going to go somewhere? I think it's in Arizona. I think they have these places in Arizona. This one baseball player had gone to a place called the Meadows in Arizona. And I was like, that's where I'm going, right? And she goes, no, actually, you can go to Alcoholics Anonymous. You can go straight there. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. And so I called Alcoholics Anonymous, which you can do, as we all know. And which I bring that up because I've done the commitment where you're sitting at some central office and people call, and it's an amazing commitment. And I called, and this guy said, yeah, there's a meeting Monday night, 8:30, men's stag at the Alano Club. Very infamous men's stag meeting, turned out. And so, they said, go to that one. And so, but I have to say, when I came clean to my parents, there was just this little, like a little dial that ticked towards you're doing the right thing. It was like, oh, God, I just felt a little bit better. But not like better, like, I don't know how to explain it. It was like better in a way that I'd never felt before. Like I trusted it. I went, oh, okay. I listened to this voice inside of me, and so I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the thing that blew me away was I walked into this meeting and at the Alano Club, and there's a big mirror there that says "We Care," and I thought that was just so like lame, like wow, how did I? But and it's not. It's awesome, But because it turns out it's true, we do care. And all these guys were in there, and they were. There was just like a light on in everybody's eyes, There was just like this. Everybody was like, there were. I'd been hanging around with such vampires, myself included, for so long. Less than zero, and these guys, and there was guys my age, there was older guys, there was younger guys, and they were all on fire, and they were so interested in me. They were like coming up, shaking my hand, welcome. And I'm like, God, I must be a cool dude, man, because they're giving me I must be the thing that just really hit AA, like I'm the man here, Turns out, that's what we do here, And I got really, really into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I really enjoyed being around sober people. I started surfing with sober guys. I went on surf trips with sober guys. We just did a bunch of cool stuff, and came to this meeting a lot. I went to a meeting almost every night for several years, and it was amazing. And some interesting things happened, though, and I really, this is the thing that I really want to talk about more than anything. I had an experience right around 5 or 6 years sober where I started to feel not okay again. I started to feel like something was missing. And I was coming to a lot of meetings. I'd had a sponsor. I had done a kind of cursory thing where I talked about the first 3 steps for 15 or 20 minutes and wrote this autobiography, not the way it's outlined in the book, but just this autobiography of my life. And then I'd gone back and I'd made some amends to some people, and it actually did some harm in making amends to some people because I didn't do it right, and that was a bad experience. Because then when you go back to them again, they're like, "Didn't we already do this?" And you're like, "Yeah, but give me one more chance," And I started to get really squirrely sober, and that's a weird feeling because, I had some knowledge and some experience in AA, and I came out of a meeting one night and I was complaining about the meeting to this friend of mine, and he goes, I'm going to take you to a meeting. He's like, these guys are like psycho about the big book, and they crosstalk, and I'm like, that sounds terrible, But we went to this meeting, and this guy shared, I'll never forget it. This guy shared on the 9th step, and in sharing on the 9th step, he talked about the first 8, and I had never heard anything like that before. Like, he was so crystal clear on the process of the 12 steps, and so crystal clear on his own experience, and I could tell by the way he was delivering it that he'd had a powerful experience, and it just completely drew me in, in a way. In one way, I was terrified because I was like, wow, I've been here for 6 years and I've never had the experience that this guy's talking about. And so I walked out of the meeting and my friend said, what'd you think? Oh, that guy thinks he knows everything, And then the next week I asked that guy to sponsor me. And 6, 7 years sober, I opened up the big book. I said this thing called the set aside prayer, where I made this prayer to set aside everything I thought I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous, myself, and my 12 steps for open mind and a new experience. And we started at the very beginning of the book, and we started to go through line by line, and we turned a lot of the statements in the book into questions. And we looked very deeply at the first step, for months, actually. Do I have this physical allergy? Do I have this thing? Do I have concrete experience with once I start, I can't stop? Do I have concrete experience with once I stop, I can't stay stopped? And he had me write down experiences with that, where I had sworn off, where I could have taken a lie detector test and passed it when I said I wasn't going to drink again. And I did have those experiences, And then we talked about higher power, and this is like super integral to my experience. It really changed everything. Was like, he started to ask me about, did I have experience, the Gnostics, in other words, agnostic means not knowing, but the Gnostics it means to know God directly, And my sponsor was very adamant about, have you had these experiences, even if it's fleeting and soon lost, to quote the book, where you felt the connection of something, or you felt the synchronicity or the serendipity of something so powerful that you knew that it wasn't a coincidence? And at first I said, no, I've never had that, And he said, why don't you look at that deeply? Like, think back. And I had those experiences. I had those experiences, And he said, well, when this book says God or Creator or Master of the Universe, plug that in for that. That's what that means for you. That's how to read this book. And the book read completely differently, because it wasn't some esoteric, weird, somebody else's concept of a power greater than myself, And so that started gave me a huge boost in the second step. By the way, I was meeting with him once a week, and during that time I was getting more and more depressed and anxious. And he was completely unconcerned about that. He wasn't like, not in a sadistic way, just more in like, he was just like, yeah, I know. He goes, God, when I was looking at this stuff, it was like everything was just getting torn down around me, And I go, yeah, exactly. That's the way I feel. And he's like, yeah, okay, well, let's keep going in the book, And I'd be like, yeah, but I feel like, and I remember he said to me one time, he goes, how you're on a boat and it's out in the dark and you're way out at sea, and then the lighthouse comes around and the light shines on you for a brief moment and then it goes dark again? He'd say stuff like that to me, and I go, yeah, that's the way I feel. And he goes, yeah, that's the way you feel right now. And he'd go, okay, well, let's keep reading this book, And it was like just enough hope to not want to jump off a bridge, And so I had a very powerful experience with the second step. And then when I took the third step with him, I had another really powerful, in the moment, crazy experience with that. And that propelled me into the 4th step. And I wrote, a 4-column inventory, fear inventory, sex inventory. Then I shared that with him in the 5th step. We looked at 6 and 7. We made a list in 8. And I started to go back and make amends to people that I'd harmed. And yes, on that list, there were a couple of people that I'd already tried to make amends to before. But in that process, I started to have, this experience that they talk about. I started to have this spiritual experience. I started to feel differently. I started to get rearranged on the inside. The way I started to have a profound difference in the reaction that I had to life, It was very humbling. It was very confusing at times. But as real as I'm standing here, I got transformed by the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, having been sober for a long time. And what grew out of that was a tremendous draw towards trying to share this thing with other people, the 12 step. And I had something to share with them. That's the thing, is like I had an experience to share with them. I had a tool, which is the big book, and I was able to start to sponsor guys, and that's been a huge part of my my sobriety since that. And like it's like I'm baffled by life a lot of the time, especially lately, and there's a lot of stuff I don't understand, and there's things that I get fearful about, and there's and I gotta say that the one time that I feel like I'm in the pocket is one-on-one. Like, I don't feel in the pocket right now. I'm nervous, and I haven't been able to shake it tonight for some reason. But when I'm sitting one-on-one with a guy and I have that big book, I feel so in the pocket and so like out of the way. I feel like I'm out of the way. I don't feel responsible for anything. I just feel like a conduit, And that is a beautiful experience. And if you haven't had that experience, like it says in the book, you're not going to want to miss that. It's so worth it to get at the 12th step. And I remember, I literally, when I was here for the first 5 or 6 years, I really thought that the sponsorship thing was for those kind of older guys that sat in the back, And like, I'm too busy surfing and doing all this other stuff, but these guys will handle it. And now here I am, I'm 60, and I'm the old guy, and I've got 36 years of sobriety. And it's like, and it's a gift. It's just been handed to me. It's like I didn't earn it. It's like if I wanted to drink, I'd be drinking. And for some reason, this thing, the want to do it has been taken away, So I got through 9, 10, and I started having 11-step practice, and I started to sponsor guys, and that's been an incredible experience. How much time do I have, ish? 15 minutes. Oh, okay. Wow. How's everybody feeling about that? I mean, did everybody kind of go, oh, shit, he's still got 15 minutes. No, so some of the, it's definitely not happily ever after that. I've had a lot of stuff happen. My brother with special needs got a really rare and terrible form of cancer. I watched him, die the most gruesome way. I can't even tell you, man. It was awful. It's been about 12 years now. That was terrible. I got divorced. I have 2 beautiful kids. Both my parents got dementia and passed away. It was, 10, 15 years ago, there were definitely periods of time where it was like, I didn't really want to be on the planet. I didn't want to drink, but I didn't really feel like being here. There was times I would drive down to after my brother passed away, my parents who buried 2 of the 3 of their sons, would drive down to their house. My dad's like, hey, I'm gonna take the electrical apart in the house, and he's like actively into one of the sockets in the wall. I remember walking into that one day, and like, I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. What's going on, and then maybe we'll get an electrician for that. And then there was my mom, bless her heart, she, how you doing, Mom? And she looks like over my shoulder and she goes, I'm doing fine, except for the guy that's in the hallway that wants to murder all of us, And it was like, I just would go down there and I'd have to pray, and they both had dementia, and we got full-time help for him and everything, but it was just a gnarly experience, and it was in the house that I grew up in, and it was a tough time, and Alcoholics Anonymous definitely carried me through that, and what really carried me through that was guys that I sponsor calling me and asking me for help in their lives. And I'm like seeing their call and going, I don't want to take this right now. I don't want to, and hey, how's it going? And then they tell me about something in their life, and then I have something to say that actually helps them. And I mean, I like it comes from somewhere else, like it comes through me again. Like I hear myself saying stuff to them that's like, wow, that's really good, and wow, I should actually listen to that myself, So that was a huge help, and then, but things have gotten way better. It's like the divorce thing healed. My kids are doing great. I'm going to get married next year. And to a new gal, and and that's really cool. And I'm going to retire from a 35-year career this coming year. I'm still very happily involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I still sponsor guys. I'm astonished at like how I don't ever want to drink or use. It's such a weird thing to have that removed. My sponsor talks about how we as alcoholics are, when it comes to alcohol, we're strangely insane. We have this weird relationship with alcohol, and he says, and I agree with him, is like we never lose that. We still have a weird relationship with it. I mean, look, what are we doing? We're all sitting here on a Saturday night talking about alcohol, 36 years later. And that's the thing, is like when it comes to alcohol, I have a weird relationship with it, and the only thing that I can do is share, hey, I have this weird relationship with alcohol. How about you? And yeah, I do too. My life really sucks because I can't stop drinking. And it's like, I still can't stop drinking, but it's not up to me. I'm being kept sober by this power, so far, and it could change, but it's been pretty great to have the remission of it for 36 years, and so I'm just really grateful to be sober. I'm really, one of my favorite promises is the one about, being able to handle situations that used to baffle us. That's the thing I noticed the most in my life. I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher since I got sober, basically, and I work in a really kind of unusual situation. I'm in a continuation school. Well, now I teach remotely. That's a whole other story. But I ended up working in this alternative high school, continuation school, and I dealt with a lot of kids that had a lot of different issues, but a lot of them had substance abuse and alcohol issues. And it's been amazing to have something to say to them. And there's been situations where, I've had kids like right in my face. You know what I mean? Like right in my face, like they're going to hit me kind of thing. And been able to diffuse that, and and then other times where I felt like hitting them, and been able to diffuse that. There was one time where this kid was really going off in my classroom, and he went out and he hit this pole with his bare hand and ended up breaking his hand. And my principal came walking down, and we're both standing there, and I had this really calm conversation with this kid that just came out of nowhere. Like I don't even know how it happened, and I was able to diffuse the situation. And my principal said, "I've never seen anything like that in my life. How did you do that?" And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. All I know is like, it's just that thing. It's that trusting that intuition. The big book calls it a sixth sense. And that the most important thing is to come up with and have a relationship with that sixth sense. That's the whole point of the big book, is to learn how to trust and rely on that. Not a book, not a sponsor, not a meeting. Those things are all important, but ultimately it's this relationship that you have with this power, and that'll solve all your problems. And that's definitely been my experience, and there's times that I don't trust it. There's times that I trust my my thinking, which is really a bad idea. And then there's times that I'll even trust like the media. I'll trust the media with it. It's a really bad idea. And then, it's like, but it's weird. It's like you kind of have to have those turns off the road and get stuck in the ruts down there, because then it pushes you back to, oh yeah, that's right. I'm sober. There's this power. All I have to do is ask it. And it's pretty cool because you get given it on a moment by moment basis. it doesn't tell you how the next 10 years is going to go, because that would ruin it for you in a way, for sure. It just is that next indicated step. What should I do next? Okay, it seems like I should walk to my car, see what that's about. But really do it, like walk to to your car. And then but maybe somebody falls and has a massive cardiac arrest next to your car. So now I'm helping that person. I thought I was walking to my car. And it's really that simple. And it's like, we get all crazy, I do, and think that we need to know what's going to happen in the next 10 years, Anyway, I think that's all I have, you guys. Really good to be here. Thanks for listening. I'm sorry if I was scattered.